Hi everyone, it's Nate with Misbehavin'. Well, spring is coming fast, and for those of us that keep bees, it's time to start feeding them with 1-to-1 sugar syrup, or invert sugar. So today, I'm going to show you how to make it and why you need it. Let's get started. The equipment you'll need for today's project is a large stew pot, a mixing spoon, a measuring cup, a funnel, and several jars to store the final product in. I'm using upcycled Snapple containers, but quart canning jars will work as well. The ingredients for today's project are simple. We need sugar and water. Lemon juice is optional. The acid helps accelerate the process, but it's not required. My stew pot is capable of holding 20 cups, so I'm going to fill it with 10 cups of water and bring it to a boil. While we wait on that, let's talk about what invert sugar is and why you need it. Common sugar, or sucrose, is a fairly complex sugar molecule, and not all organisms can readily absorb it and metabolize it. When you add heat to it, it begins to break down, and you end up with two sugar molecules, a glucose and a fructose, and a little bit of water in the process. You can add an acid, such as lime juice, which will aid in the process of breaking down the sugar molecule, but it isn't necessary. Simple sugars, such as glucose and fructose, are much more readily digestible by many organisms. Glucose, where most of us are familiar with since it's in our blood sugar. Fructose is also very similar and readily breaks down into things such as glucose. These forms of sugar make it much easier on your bees to metabolize. So in other words, they have to spend less time processing sucrose with the aid of an enzyme they produce to create glucose and fructose, which are actually two of the components in honey. By removing this extra step, you actually aid your bees in producing more energy with less effort, and this helps the colony's overall health. Okay, now that the water's come to a boil, it's time to add our 10 cups of sugar. As you can see, adding the sugar quenches the boil, so you may need to pace yourself to let it keep rolling. And don't forget to mix it in as you go. There's our 10 cups of sugar. Get those mixing in. We don't want the sugar to caramelize on the bottom of the pan or pot. What we're doing here is we're creating a supersaturated solution. That is that as the water boils, the water molecules are shaking pretty violently, which opens up, you could say, small gaps in the molecules, and the sugar actually dissolves and fills those gaps. Think of it like having a jar full of beans and then you pour in sugar or salt. If you shake the jar enough, the sugar and salt settles down inside between the beans, and you end up with seemingly more in the jar than when you started, more than the jar could hold. But that's the reason why if this stuff freezes too much, it will salt out. That is where the sugar actually forms crystals and comes out of the water solution. So now that we've got it all dissolved, I am going to add 1 lemon worth of lemon juice. And now we allow it to sit at a low boil for probably about 20 minutes. It'll continually turn a darker yellow-orange, and then if you let it go long enough, it'll turn brown and eventually dark brown like molasses. Okay, been boiling for 20 minutes. It's time to bottle this up. I'm going to ladle the syrup in because pouring the whole pot is pretty tough. The other thing to do is these Snapple jars may not be rated for the heat, and even though I've done similar hot drinks, I'm not sure how they'll take this boil because the sugar adds a lot of thermal energy or heat capacity to the liquid. So I'm going to add a little bit to each one to kind of acclimate them. And then we'll go ahead and fill them up. As previously discussed, this sugar is broken down into readily metabolizable components for a lot of organisms. So if you don't preserve it, it will ferment quickly, either forming yeast colonies, bacteria colonies, and even algae very quickly. So one way to preserve it is to treat it like a fruit preserve or a sugar canning. The sugar content is high, so it preserves itself pretty well as long as you keep the oxygen out of the equation. Okay, now that they're filled, it's just time to cap them off. I'm going to set the caps on for the moment and then grab a dish towel since they are quite hot. And then holding the jar, seal each one. Just like in canning, after a short cool down period, you should hear the caps ping and pop down. And that should indicate that you have some Invert sugar syrup preserved and ready to use on your bees when the time comes. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful or informative, please give it a thumbs up. That helps our channel. If you want to see more videos like it, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure the bell notification is checked so you'll know when I upload new videos. We're going to upload about every 2 weeks in the categories of DIY, homesteading, and farming. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great day.